Hello and welcome to the Offshoot. I'm the host, Lee Sean Nelson. Why are you so angry? I understand that there are things going on, not only in this country, but around the world in terms of gas prices being high, even though they're coming down just a little bit. Housing is out of reach for most people. Most people can't find a brand new car or a used car because there's such a high demand. With all that being said, is that the reason why you are angry, or is there something else going on? I have a special guest here today who's going to help me answer that question, if you will. My guest today is Tifarah Thomas. Tifarah, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm blessed. Thank you. How are you doing, Sean?
I am very well. I'm so happy to see you and so happy to have you on the Offshoot. This is a topic that I've been wanting to talk about for a while. I do feel like there are a number of angry people out there, especially people like us, people of color, who not only have inherent trauma, but there seems to be something else going on that's making us angry. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and why you are able to speak about this topic of why people are so angry.
Well, thank you so much for having me. So a little bit about myself. I'm from Southeast Texas originally. Traveled around a bit as a child. Recently left my government job last year, like a lot of people when the Great Resignation. And yeah, I'm working right now on publishing my first book, as well as creating a manifestation coaching program. So, and getting ready to set out away from the US and see a lot of Africa. So I'm looking forward to that. As far as, I guess, why people are angry, I guess I would say I've studied a lot of spiritual texts, mostly around the Hermetic principles, which is kind of underscores the program that I'm creating, a coaching program. So I would say, from a spiritual standpoint, people are angry because there is a disconnect between their higher power or even just the God within them. I mean, and that's sort of the short version of, what I believe. So, but there's so many different things that are happening. I think anger is also, one of the steps of grieving, and so a lot of people are kind of stuck there, in that step. And depending on, who we're talking about. And then, of course, with Black people in America, as you said, there's so many layers of trauma there, and not to mention, having to endure systemic racism and oppression, that has effects at the DNA level. I mean, we know this, from scientific studies, and you can look at how, certain things are carried on the DNA, like trauma. So when you look at like all of that that's happening, and then the fact that there's COVID on top of that, it's a wonder that we're not all just really out there like losing it, So I think we're doing a great job keeping it together. So
But let's start with something more in layman's terms in terms of why people are angry. It seems that even before the pandemic, there was some level of anger bubbling under the skin of most people, if you will. And then the pandemic hit, and then it just seemed to come to the surface. And I'm not going to go into the whole political thing, if you will.
Right.
But it still seems like there is something that is on the surface of people's skin that when you even try to be nice to someone, you get anger in return of kindness. And
Right.
so let's start with something in layman's terms in terms of trying to understand where that is coming from. Do you, does it make sense to you? Have you seen that out there, or where kindness is repaid with some kind of anger?
I have mostly in America because, traveling abroad, I feel, I mean, personally, I don't have those kinds of experiences, and I didn't even like pre-pandemic. I would say a lot of it I can kind of trace back to, it feels like a lot of it started Well, and it depends on the reactions from different groups of people. I remember moving to DC in 2008. And so right around, the time of the elections, and then shortly thereafter in 2009, there was a shift in the way that certain people behaved. And, even in terms of, and I know we said we weren't going into the political thing, but quite honestly, that's where I can kind of trace it back to. It was a different kind of feeling. And
wasn't there some positive energy there as well because of the election?
oh, sure.
Of Obama?
Absolutely. But I remember having a conversation with a gentleman who worked at I think it was the German embassy, and he was saying that he sort of saw and this is like early in 2009, like he could see this like a certain level of like disrespect that was happening, from congressional members, and this is someone who was a German citizen, watching this, as an outsider, if you will. And I thought, well, that's interesting that he's, saying he sees this, because a lot of people are, in full denial, of what's happening here,
Yes.
And then when we saw, with Trump, being elected, there was what people talked a lot about. I remember like in the news stories were like cultural norms, and there was a shift in like the way that, like in the decorum and like the way that we expected, for people to behave. And, and so it just seemed like people just kind of like all of that went out of the window, like, in the Trump presidency. And so I think like just from what I remember and like witness, those were the two different types of shifts, for different reasons, but related.
So you're saying that you think that there was this bubbling of anger. It was slow boiling at the beginning. That's been going on for like 13 years. And where we are right now in 2022, that the slightest bit of interaction with someone can just set someone off. So people have been, they've been holding it in for at minimum 10, 13 years, if not longer.
Well, in all actuality, some of it may be like genetic as well, in terms of like, the stories that people are told, like this is what happened and this is why we do this. And because everybody's got their stories, that their families tell, and, like that's part of like their particular, culture, like, because, in America, we have so many different subcultures, and, depending on where you're from, so. Yeah, people have their stories. So yeah.
So in other words, then what you're saying is that there is an inherent reason why there's some anger, and then again, there's also something that's existential that is that is causing this anger. And I guess when the two come together, there is this nuclear explosion.
It's systemic too, right? So then there's that. So it's like it's part of the foundation, like of America, because the challenge is that we've got all these different versions of, America, and like our history and why certain things happened or didn't happen. And then you've got people that just don't want to hear, certain aspects of that, because it impacts their story that they're telling and their truth that they want to, their set of alternative facts that they want to subscribe to. And that's upsetting, I think, to some people when someone is disrupting their version of their reality. So there's that, but then you have, the actual truth that happened, and you've got people that are suffering from, real impacts of the version of the truth that we're told to subscribe to, which leaves out a lot. It's not that it's a lie so much as there have been things that have been left out of the full story and of America, and more gets left out as like curriculums change in schools. And so there's a lot of shifting of the story of America that I think we've experienced in the last like decade. And so as that story of America shifts, then I feel like it definitely impacts the way that the level of anger that people have, and just their inability to have a conversation and
or be
agree to disagree.
rational.
Yeah, like it doesn't have to be an argument. It used to be that, having a conversation, was a thing that people could do without it, devolving into something nasty. But in all actuality, when you have, the increase of like social media and like the lack of people having actual conversations anymore, people literally just don't necessarily know how to have a conversation anymore, because we emphasize, social media and that disconnect and social distancing, which, they probably misnamed. Maybe they did it, I don't know, on purpose, but it should have been not social distancing, but, physical, I think distancing would have been better. But people just being further and further apart from each other and just having this inability to really connect. And so that's honestly, I think, increasing the disconnect and the anger levels because we just lack the patience. So
let's make this a little more relative for some people. Let's talk about, for example, driving. Most people have cars, not everyone, but a lot of people drive, and we're here in Washington, D.C., but I'm in DC and you're in Baltimore, and we've lived around the country, in our adult lives, so we know what traffic is like in small towns and in big cities from the East Coast to the West Coast. So let's talk about driving, because I think that's something that people can relate to.
Right.
So here in Washington, D.C., there is growing evidence, and there is proof that traffic behaviors have gotten worse over the last 2 years. So we've had more incidences of where cyclists have been hit and unfortunately killed by vehicles. We had unfortunately a young child who was hit by a vehicle last year and passed away in a neighborhood here in DC. And people don't seem to care about what the speed limit is or that the traffic light is red. And I wonder, is all of this change in driving behavior stemming from some level of anger, whether it be existential, like we said, or inherent, like we said, or is it the two coming together and creating this nuclear explosion? And then when they get on the highways, they're driving like they're the only ones on the road.
Yeah, I actually think it's everything, like things are just converging, on themselves. And I think people are, first of all, and I didn't say it this way, but I was watching something on the news and it said that we're all suffering from some level of, post-traumatic, stress as a result of, COVID. But in all actuality, a lot of us were suffering from that prior, to, depending on where you sat on the spectrum of things, and then you have levels of that, within different communities. So let's just say that we're all suffering from a lot of trauma. And then on top of that, we've got our other issues. So yes, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with people just being in their bubble and not really caring, for those who this applies to, not really caring about others, because I believe that COVID, really brought out more of who you are. So either you show that you care more or you show that you don't care more. There's less of the gray area now for people. So we're seeing more of who people have decided who they really will be, like at their core. I mean, ultimately, I think everybody is, of the light, but there are some people who have stepped further away from that. It's a difference between scarcity mindset and like abundance, mindset. So people are deciding that scarcity is the way to go. Some people, whereas some people are like, no, I can be abundant and I can actually have enough, and other people around me can have enough too, but it's just, I will say that sometimes I do notice more of the scarcity mindset when I'm on the road, for example, you know, driving. I mean, it just very much a lot of like selfishness. And I didn't think there was anything worse than the roads in DC until I got to Baltimore. And I was like, this is really bad. I mean, I live next to an elementary school and I see people run that. I mean, when school is in session, I see people run the stop sign all day. And I'm thinking, by the grace of God, there's no child walking across the street. But, you know, it's like people just, they don't care.
Do you think that people who, like you said, are more thinking about the scarcity part of where things are, that they do not recognize their anger, that they don't recognize that there is something that's there within themselves that's causing this behavior that is not the norm, versus those people who probably do recognize that they had some anger and therefore trying to choose light instead?
It's interesting you asked that question, because I was having a conversation with a friend before this, and she said that her mom, before her mom passed away, she was always her mom was always asking her, why are you so angry? And she said that she was angry because she wanted more for her life at the time. She was like a young woman, like in her early 20s. And so she just didn't know how to get it. You know, I guess she knew that she wanted more out of her job, and just like she had a higher purpose than what she was doing at the time, but she just didn't know how to go after it. And so I actually think that for some people, they're aware that they're angry, and you may even have a clue as to why. And then there are others who, at least consciously, are not, aware, So I think it's probably a split there. Yeah.
So for those people then who are aware, or for a mother to ask her child why she's so angry, I'm thinking that mother has some kind of sense, if you will, about her own child, but again, wasn't able to get that child to articulate what was really going on. So that brings me to my next question then. This young lady didn't quite know how to get to where she thought she should be. So let me ask you this. Is it because she was buying into this American narrative that this is what success is supposed to look like? And if you're not there, then you're a failure, and therefore they create some kind of anger?
Yeah. I mean, I think to a larger extent, especially when you talk about people from, say, Generation X and back, there's definitely like a narrative that, we grew up with that was like, all right, get a good job. And, I mean, to a larger extent, there are exceptions to that. I mean, I'm Generation X, and like, I think I always knew that I could do anything, but at the same time, like there were a lot of, my mom encouraged me to do whatever I wanted, but there were a lot of voices around me, that were like, well, like you might want to just go with something safe, and, whatever safe was, I mean, which played havoc, in my mind, because I started out in, finance and accounting, and then I ended up, working at NASA, and that was great. So everybody's like, that's NASA, and that's all I should have ever aspired to. But, it's like, there are things beyond NASA even, and it's like, and what really people should do when I'm figuring out, in life is whatever it is that brings you joy. I mean, that's ultimately the key to your, knowing your divine purpose. So, but yeah, absolutely. There's this, narrative that we have to consistently fight, I think, as Black people. Unfortunately, this is global, in a lot of ways, because I was watching an Instagram interview of a guy in South Africa who, would show up at, meetings, and they were like, oh, well, where's the boss at? Like referring to some imaginary white man, I guess. I'm not sure. but again, just dealing with, racism and this idea of, what box, people think you should fit into,
Yeah.
based on what you look like. And he was a darker skinned guy with, natural like hair, like locks, he had it locked. And so, people having to deal with, or what he called negotiating his blackness, and so that is, like I said, Generation X back in this country, that is a regular thing. And I'm sure it happens to like millennials and Gen Z, people as well, but less probably, like these days than before. So, but yeah, it's a thing, like it's a thing because of, yeah.
So let me ask you this question then. Sorry to interrupt. Let me ask you this question then.
Sure, yeah.
So do you think that, and this is, again, you can be general, do you think in general that one reason that Black people in general are not or are angry is because they have to always defend who they are, their identity, and therefore they're not happy when they have to always defend their identity, and that creates anger? And I'm not saying that the two are connected, but I'm asking, do you think that there's something there?
Absolutely. I mean, like, I can't even really begin to even imagine what it would be like if I didn't have to, on some level, explain who I am, or why I'm different, or why, I don't fit into the stereotype, like, because all those things have been said to me or implied, or like, I've been questioned about it, like on multiple jobs and everyone that I know, it's like, but imagine living in a world where you're part of the group of people that gets to not have to explain, and quite honestly, that's one of the things that appeals to me about going to Africa, especially, Central and South, it's like where I look around and I'm not standing out and people aren't asking me, why, or well, what, like I don't have this sense of having to explain, my blackness, yeah. And it's just like, and just even out of just the feeling of it. And so, yes, I think the thing is that people in America and other places, obviously too, but definitely in this country, I think there's just a sense of people being tired. And again, I haven't put a lot of emphasis on it, but let's not forget what kind of programming and what kind of output, is coming from, the news outlets and the reality shows and the social media and all of the marketing and all of the subliminal, but not, I mean, for people who know marketing, it's like, the messages are there, and it's not, we didn't just wake up to it. This is generations, of messaging and, of television programming, so there's a disconnect though, right? Between what the advertisers and the marketers want us to believe, and then like what I think people are waking up to as like the truth. And I think that I actually believe that this is also a source of the anger. People are like, wait a minute, like I've been lied to, like I've been duped, like I'll never get to what the carrot that they're holding out there. I'll never have it, because the system was designed for me to not have it, because, and then, and it just, depending on what the carrot is, but yeah, so I think people are just kind of waking up to the reality of this is not the version of America that, they were sold, and actually the ironic thing is that everybody's mad about that. Everybody's mad about that specifically, no matter what, ethnic group you're in, or, non-ethnic, ethnic, whatever category you fall into, everybody's mad about that, because people are like, this isn't the America that I know and love, or that I believe in. So
which is why we have to define success for ourselves and create our own narratives and not buy into the marketing that comes from corporate America, which
Oh my God.
fuels the capitalism that we live in today. But I
Amen.
don't want to go into all of that. So we do have to unfortunately bring this conversation to an end, but I do want to continue this conversation because I think that you said some very, very important things regarding where anger comes from. But we didn't give you a chance to talk about how can we work to get over the anger. Well, actually, no, let's do that. Give me some things that you think that people can do to work through or get over this anger.
Okay. The first thing is to focus on loving yourself more. Number one. Self-care is a good way to start. Rest is a good way, to continue that. Doing things that bring you joy, like that's a clue. Like if something is irritating you, do less of that or none of it at all, if you can. I understand work can be irritating. Work and then leave work at work. Don't overwork. Have good boundaries. That's another way, to deal with anger, because a lot of times people don't have good boundaries and they're mad because they're being abused, but they're allowing the abuse. Just say no. Learn how to say no and be comfortable with it. Be unapologetic. So that's another way. What else? Yeah, like spending time with people who lift your spirits, like that is a real thing. Like if you're around a bunch of negative people, guess what? You're gonna not feel good. Like when you're done, hanging out with those people. So focus on hanging out with people and spending time with people that make you feel good, that you enjoy being around. If you don't like being around people, then that's a clue, like that is a clue. Be around them less. Even if it is family, you can love family from a distance. Trust me, I know. So I think those are couple clues, a couple of ways.
I would add one thing to that, and I would add that learn to enjoy your time with yourself.
Amen.
Learn to be alone with you and be happy with just being by yourself. It's
yes.
It's
priceless.
It is priceless. Yes. Yeah. No one can love you more than you can love yourself.
Yes.
So,
amen to that. Amen to that.
Yes. But tell us about your book before we end this conversation.
Okay, yeah. So my book is, don't have a working title yet, but my book is about a little bit about the time that I spent at NASA and how I use the 7 Hermetic principles to manifest, different things, to get over, certain challenges. And I wrote it kind of in the Robert Greene style, like, because there are times where I didn't use the principles and, I use it in the negative way, because the universal principles work either way. So I was using it not knowing, and then I was using it knowingly, and then I was able to, overcome certain things. And so I share some of those stories, and I believe that it will actually hopefully, help a lot of people just in their journey, and just letting it's like, even though you're going through things, there's always another way. So, yeah.
And if folks want to get in touch with you, how are they able to do that?
Just reach out to me, tifarah.e.thomas@gmail.com. So Tifarah is TIF like Frank ARAH.E.thomas@gmail.com. Yeah.
Folks, there you have it. Please check her out. She has lots of knowledge that she is happy to share.
Yes.
Please share this episode of The Offshoot. You can find The Offshoot at theoffshoot.org, or you can go to YouTube and find us there. We're also on Twitter. Thank you for watching, and we see you again next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.